Welcome everybody. Welcome Abayim. So we're going to begin today's amud is gimmel amud aleph. Makkos gimmel amud aleph. We're going to finish the last three lines on base amud base. So today's amud we're going to be discussing primarily memra of Rav in Eidim Zaymim. That's one of the main issues of the day, and then there's two new Mishnayos. Maybe we'll get to see them both. Also in Eidim Zaymim. So the last three lines from the bottom. We're going to discuss this memra of Rabbi Akiva. Rabbi Akiva said that Eidim Zaymim ein mishalem al piyatzma. If someone comes in and says, I was Huzam, we lied, we're going to see exactly what the case is, he doesn't pay. So says the Gemarah, three lines at the bottom, Mishum Rabbi Akiva they said the name Rabbi Akiva. My time the Rabbi Akiva. Why does Rabbi Akiva say that he doesn't pay? If he says I was Huzam, if he says we lied, he doesn't pay. Because he holds Knossahu. Rabbi Akiva holds that when you do Kasha Zomam, that's not a financial, it's not mominus. Mominus means you're paying a debt. It's not a debt, it's a knas, it's a fine. In other words, you're not paying damages, you're not paying damages that you caused someone. It's just a fine that Torah gives you. You try to do something wrong, we'll give you a fine. You parked illegally, you get a fine. It's not because you damaged someone. So we're not evaluating the amount of damage you caused. There's a fine, and there's a cloud. If anyone comes into Beis Din and says, I did something wrong, give me the knas, we say, no, if you're maida, you don't pay the fine. Because it means you admit you did something wrong, you don't have to pay. If you try to avoid it, you lie, then you got to pay the knas.
So lashes is considered a fine too?
No.
Or
that's a punishment. Fine means you're paying cash.
Fine has to be money.
Well, no, so
you know what I'm saying?
I hear what you're saying. So the even lashes in by kasha zomam, that's also fine. It's a fine. You're not paying anyone, but that's not a chiddush. Hey, you're obviously not paying anyone, but no one's benefiting from the fact that you get lashes. But it's a fine. Yeah. Okay. So if someone comes in and says we lied, we should get lashes. No, now you don't get the lashes. Ein mishalem al piyatzma. Omar Rabba. Teda. You should know. Of course you don't pay al piyatzma. Why? Shari lo yosem ma'isa. They didn't do anything. Right? U'mishalmim, even though they didn't actually damage the guy, they didn't make him pay, or they didn't make that guy get the lashes, they still get it. Right? Therefore, obviously, it's a fine. It's not mominous. It's not a penalty. Amar Reb Nachman Teda. I'll tell you something else. Shari momim biad bailim u'mishalmim. He's still holding on to the cash. They tried to get this innocent guy to pay you $100, and he's still holding on to his money. He didn't pay because we know the klal, right? The klal is if he pays, then you don't pay. If he doesn't pay, then you do pay. So if they try to make someone pay, it sounds very similar to the last. It sounds very similar to Rabbah. So Gemarah says, "Mainihu delayosum ma'isa hainu the Rabbah." Isn't that just what Rabbah said? It's the same thing. Gemarah answers, "Ema v'chein amar of Nachman." You're right. Same thing. They're both saying the same thing. Obviously, it's not mammon. It's not restoration. Is that the word? Restoration. You're not restoring the guy's damages. It's a knas, because if he actually paid, then you don't pay. So it's actually machlaikas if the din of hargo ein rogan. If you kill the guy, then they don't kill the Eidim Zaymim, right? That's the klal. If Eidim come and say Reuven killed someone, kill him, we gave him Asra, and then they kill him. If they actually killed him, so you don't kill the Eidim Zaymim. Only if they tried to kill him and it was stopped before they killed him, then we give the Eidim Zaymim the same Misa. The question is, does that apply to Momin also? Because by Misa, you can't bring the guy back to life saying, whoops, it's a mistake. But by Mominus, you can say, give back the money, and now make the Eidim Zaymim pay. Right? So maybe it's a machlekes if we say the same thing by Mominus. It could be by Mominus, if they paid, then you don't make them. Then you can still make them pay, even if the innocent guy they were trying to bust actually does pay. Okay, so it says the Gemarah. We're on Gimel Amud Aleph, top of the page. Amar Rav Yehuda Amar Rav. Now this is a memo of Rav that we're going to try and understand. Amar Yehuda Amar Rav. Eid Zayim Mishalem Lefi Chalkai. 1/8 he pays his part. We're going to try and understand what that means. Eid Zayim Mishalem Lefi Chalkai. 1/8 Zayim he pays his portion. What does that mean? My Mishalem Lefi Chalkai. What does this mean? If you're going to tell me that each one pays half. In other words, Eidim Zayimim, 2 Eidim come and say, Reuven stole and he owes $100. So if you're going to tell me it means each Eid Zayimim now is caught, they're caught lying, each one pays 50, does each one pay 50? Each one pays now 100. That's the question. If you're going to tell me, the Rav's telling me that each one only pays half, each one pays 50, Tanina, we learned at the Brisa, Mishalshin b'mamai ve'mishalshin b'malkus. You split the mammon, but you don't split malchus. In other words, if 2 guys try and give a guy malchus, you don't say each one gets 20 or half 39, 30, 18 and a half. You don't split the malchus. Each one gets 39 malchus. But with mammon, you split the mammon. Each one pays 50. So what's Rav's chiddush? It's already a Brisa. Rav's telling me something new. We know that. What's Rav adding over here? That you split the mammon. So that's a kasha on Rav. So what's Rav telling me? That the Brisa didn't tell me. The Brisa says, if you're coming to be mechayiv a guy 100, each one pays 50. So the Gemarah answers, Ella, you're going to itzum chad benayu. Only one of them was huzam. Only one of them was set. They said on one of them in mano yisem. The mishal and palga the day. Then he pays half. Now, as you got 2 Eidim, one of the Eidim come and say, one of those Eidim was with us. He can't know. So he pays half. Also Gemarah, Mishalim. This guy, if you only captured one of them lying, does he pay? Vatanya. It says in the price, Ein Eidzayim Mishalim Mammon, Ad Sheyuzmu Shneihem. You never make the Eidzayim, one Eidzayim pay. You have to, unless both of them are Huzam. If only one of them was said in Mano Yisem, he doesn't pay.
It's not valid if only one of them came and said, Yadut.
Why? What do you mean? Why is it not valid? No, 2 Eidim come and say. So Reuven and Shimon testified that Yankel stole.
We only.
Now another 2 Eidim come and say that Reuven Imana Yisrael.
Okay.
We don't know about the other guy. You might have been there. Mm-hmm. It's a very likely scenario, but we know one of them was for sure lying. Does he have to pay? Kasha Zomam? No. He only does. We didn't do Kasha Zomam.
Since one witness is invalid, do we still?
No, the other guy's still good. He's a good witness.
Still good.
He's a good witness.
But he's the only one now.
Yeah, there's only one witness. Right, there's only one witness left. He's not going to have to pay. We're not going to enact justice based on one witness. But we can't do Kasha Zomam on one by himself. Right.
So he pays half, or he doesn't pay?
So he doesn't pay anything unless you do Kasha Zomam on both of them. Mm-hmm. You can never do Kasha Zomam on one. It's got to be on 2.
Okay.
So, Omar Rava. So, how are you going to find a case? How are you going to find a case where one of them pays? That's what we're stuck with. In other words, Rav says one pays. When does one pay? When do you have a case where 1/8 pays? So, Omar Rava, Ba'aymer, Eidu Sheker He'adati. I'll tell you the case. This is the case. A guy comes into Beis Din and he says, Eidu Sheker He'adati. Now, it's a big machlekes what this means. He says, I lied. So the Gemarah asks, we'll get in a second what exactly that means. The Gemarah asks, Kol Kamini, is he believed? We have a cloud that you can never change your testimony. He gave a testimony. He said, Reuven owes Shimon money. Now you can't go ahead and change your mind and say, I lied. So first of all, so what's the Havmin of the Gemarah? The Havmin of the Gemarah is that this should be like Kasha Zomam. This should be like a case of Kasha Zomam, he should have to pay. So, why should he have to pay? If a guy says, I lied, now he's got to pay? What's that got to do with Hazama? So, some Mepharshim explain, it means that he comes into Beis Din and he says, it's got to be similar to if other Eidim say, Yimana Yisa. If Eidim say, Yimana Yisa, you couldn't be there, then he has to pay. So, what would the guy be saying? So, he comes into Beis Din and he says, I couldn't have known what happened. I'll prove to you that I'm lying because I was actually somewhere else when this Maisa happened. So basically he does Hazama on himself. If he just says, you should know I lied, Reuven didn't lend money to Shimon. There's no Havamin that he should have to pay. But the Havamin in the Gemara here is that if he comes and says, I couldn't have known what happened because I was somewhere else entirely, I was on a cruise ship, so we're going to believe him he was on a cruise ship. You were Muslim yourself, so to speak. Now you got to pay.
Does he have to bring the email confirmation?
Let's say he brings email confirmations, even better. Doesn't make it worse, that's for
I'm
sure.
not asking if he, in this case, does he?
He doesn't need to know. So the Havamina is he's believed. He's believed to say, I couldn't have known the truth. I was actually in America at this time, right? And the Gemara says, no, you can't do that because you're not named to change your original testimony. So, Taisus doesn't like this at all. Take a look in the first Taisus, the end of the bottom wide line. The Kachesh Lefarish. Take a look at Taisus. Taisus says why he doesn't like that.
Where are you?
The top Taisus, the fifth line in Taisus, is the last wide line. Taisus Lekachesh Lefarish Eidu Sheker Adi. He comes into base and says Eidu Sheker Adati. Now, Taisus saying, what do you mean? Of course, that's not Huzam. There's no have a minute. There's no logical reason why. There's a pasuk in the Torah that if a guy says I was somewhere else, that I should have to pay now. Like that makes no sense, says Taisus. Right? That's the obvious kashi all asking. Like, when it say in the Torah, if I said I was somewhere else, it's like I'm Huzam by other Eidim I should have to pay. It's ridiculous, right? So says Taisus the Kachish Lefarish Eidu Sheker Adati. He comes in and says I lied. And then another two Eidim come in and say, Imana Yisem, you were with us on the cruise ship. Right? So if one guy comes into base and says, I lied, two Eidim, Reuven and Shimon come and say that I stole money. And then Reuven says, guess what? I was on a cruise ship. I lied. Okay, so now we don't know what to do. You got two Eidim. Before the Psak Din, another two Eidim come and say, you're both with us on the cruise ship, you couldn't have known. Right? So now the guy that says I lied, we're not going to do Kasha Zaman on him, because he was Maider. But the other guy now has to pay.
Wait a minute, the guy can't retract his testimony though.
So that's the Gemara's answer. The Gemara says, no, you can't retract your testimony, you both have to pay. But the half a minute is that, since he retracted his testimony, he doesn't have to pay now. That's the half a minute of the Gemara. The half a minute of the Gemara says, he retracted his testimony, he said I lied, so now who pays? Not the guy that says I lied. According to Rashi, the guy that says I lied, he has to pay because he was Muslim himself. According to Taisus, that guy doesn't have to pay. Who pays? The other guy. The other guy says I'm telling the truth, and then two Eidim come and say Mona Yisim on the cruise ship. The other guy has to pay. He didn't retract his testimony. He was Huzam. They're both Huzam. Now that guy has to pay. The Gemara answers, no. There's no such thing as retracting a testimony. He didn't retract his testimony, and therefore when other Eidim come and say, Yehuzam, they both have to pay now. So that falls off. This way of getting one Eid Zayim to pay doesn't check out. Yeah.
Now, I was just thinking, based on how we've learned in Kosher Mishpat, I mean, you would be thinking this guy's only retracting his testimony because he knows these guys are coming to Mizamin him. And therefore,
So that's why he's not believed, or that's why...
That's what I'm asking, yeah.
But it's irrelevant why he's doing it. He's made into the truth. He knows the truth's going to come out. He changed his mind. Okay.
Well, he didn't change his mind about lying. He changed his mind about the consequences of him being able to lie. If he can lie,
if he can get away with it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So as a Tozer is saying that he's just retracting the statement.
So yeah, he says I
It's not-
lied.
because it's not possible for him to be Mazarin himself.
Yeah, you can't be mzamin yourself. There's no havamin. There's no logical havamina. You can be mazim yourself or be mechayiv yourself mom and kasha zoma. Just because I said okay, I was somewhere else, that means that I should have to pay now. Now, Lefi Rashi, the havamin of the Gemara is right. Unless you say this thing of einod mesim, kivin shiga shivin chayzamagid. Before this klal of kivin shiga shivin chayzamagid, Lefi Rashi, you testified in Beis Din. And then you said, if you said I lied, then you don't have to pay. You don't have to pay, right? And you'd be believed. But if you say I lied, and guess what? I was somewhere else entirely. I couldn't be telling the truth. Then you got to pay. That's Rashi's Havamina. Tosfos says, no, that's not a Havamina. There's no such Havamina that you have to pay yourself if you mazim yourself. That's ridiculous.
What's the essence of the dispute?
Normally with Rashi and Tosfos, the essence of the dispute is, do you go with the Pashtus Lashon of the Gemarah, or do you dig in a little bit deeper and say, this must be what it means? Rashi always tries to stick more to the Lashon of the Gemarah. The Lashon of the Gemarah is, L'chayr, we're talking about the guy says, I lied, and now the guy that says I lied, he's the guy that has to pay. Tosfos says, no, of course he doesn't have to pay. He's talking about the other guy has to pay. Tosfos always is willing to dig a little bit deeper and come to a different conclusion. That's normally the machlokes with Rashi and Tosfos. Do you go with the Pashtus Lashon of the Gemarah or not? So I think that's what's happening over here. Rashi goes with the Pashtus Lashon of the Gemarah. The Lashon is mashma, Eidu Sheker Adti, and he should pay. Tosfos says, no, he's talking about the other guy pays. Maybe. So the Gemara answers no. Kivet shehigid shuv einoi chayzor magid. You can't change your mind. Ella. So what's going to be the case? What's going to be a possible option? Ella ba'emer. So we're trying to find, we're going back into Rabbi Kiva here, trying to find the case where he doesn't have to pay. Sorry, we're going back into Rav that says a guy pays the fichalkai. 1/8 zaymim is going to pay, right? So when do you ever have a case where 1/8 zaymim pays? That's the kasha here. When will 1/8 zaymim ever pay? They walk at the basin, or he walks at the basin, and he says, me and my friend testified in a different beis din, and we were huzamu. We were huzam.
On the same case?
They walk at the beis din and say, by the way, you should know, I was huzam in a different beis din. Yeah, on a case, right? This beis din isn't taking me to beis din. I walk at the beis din. They have no din Torah against it. I walk at the beis din. I say, you should know, I was huzam. I walk at the beis din in Yerushalayim. I say, I was huzam in the beis din in Bnei Brak. So what's going to be the din? And so take a look in Rashi. Actually, I'll just tell you outside. But come on, this can't be like Rabbi Kiva. Why? So in other words, what's the havamina here? If the guy walks at the beis din and he says, we will huzam in beis din, his friend says, I know what he's talking about, right? His friend says, nothing doing. I've never met this guy before in my life. But he says, I was huzam in beis din. So the havamina is that you're going to have to pay. You said you were huzam in beis din, so pay. You're saying you owe money. You got to pay. The other guy, he doesn't have to pay. You're not neman on your friend. He's chayv mammon. But if you said you were huzam, so you pay, right?
This makes no sense because
Why?
if you were huzam in a beis din and another beis din, they would have made you pay.
They didn't pay. They said you got two months to pay, and that's it. And the base is shut down. You left the country. You didn't get a chance to pay. You come at the base and you say, I was huzam. Now let me pay. Does his friend have to pay? No. Because his friend, there's no way on the friend. He's not made. He says, no, I was never huzam. And you say, I was huzam. So the Gemara asks, come on, who's this going according to? Delay, Rabbi Kiva. This can't be. Rav's Mema can't fit in Lifi Rabbi Kiva. Rav has to be arguing on Rabbi Kiva. Why? The Rabbi Kiva, Rabbi Kiva has a klal. If you say you're chayiv for kasha zamam, then you're pata. If you walk into the base and you say I'm chayiv kasha zamam, then you don't pay. So we're trying to fit Rav's Meimer into Rabbi Kiva. Ella ba'omer he'adnu v'zamnu b'beisin ploni v'chevanu mammon. So he says we testified in Beis Din, and Beis Din, it wasn't just the Eidim came and busted us. V'chevanu mammon, they made it into mammon. They said you got to pay. Now since it's now becomes a mammon, sakadata chamina kiven de lachav lo motzi mechayev le yunam lo mechayev. The havamina is that if he says we were chayiv mammon, since his friend doesn't have to pay, he also doesn't have to pay. Kamash Malan says Rav that he has to pay himself. So he's trying to fit this into Rabbi Kiva also, and therefore what's he saying? That once beis din is mechayiv you mammon, it no longer is a knas. It's a knas before you have to pay. But once the basin says pay, now it's like you owe the guy money. Once the basin says pay, it doesn't matter where that chiyuv mammon comes from. Now you owe them money. Now it's too late to be moida. Now it's no longer knas money. Now it's mammon money. Take a look in Rashi. Rashi explains v'chivanu mammon. It's about 5 lines from the bottom of the Gemarah.
It's just above the Al-Gosabah.
Just below that Gosabach. He'adnu, take a look. He'adnu. Ani upleini v'chaveiro yenim moida. Me and my friend testified. My friend isn't moida. V'chivanu mammon bebeis din. Shuzamnu v'madnu adidu bedin. Alaz maseinu. V'chivunu bebeis din. We testified and they were mechayev us. Now mahu shaita mamaynu gabe. Now the other basin who said you have to pay, that's no longer knas. Now that becomes mammon. Ve'en ze mashiach atzmai shekva yeshua Elohim. So that's not called mashiach atzmai. What's the klal made the knas potter? Because the pasuk says Asher yeshua Elohim. That if basin's mechayev you got to pay. Basin was ready mechayev him. That's what he's got to pay. Now it's no longer. You can't say basin wasn't mechayev me. I was mechayev myself. No, basin was mechayev him. He's just being meider now that he owes mammon. That's no longer. He can no longer pot himself with this Asher Yeshun pasuk.
It's not Eidus anymore.
It's no longer knas. That's the makor. It's no longer knas. This is now mammonus. Therefore, you can fit a Rabbi Kiva. In other words, he's saying, if you're Rabbi Kiva, if you come into basin and say, I was chayiv in a different basin for kasha zamam, they said pay up money, they will chayiv you mammon, then you do have to pay. The question is when this guy walks into Beis Din and he says I have to pay, I was chayiv in a different Beis Din, right? Is he saying that the Eidim Zayim were telling the truth and I really have to pay? Or are you saying that they lied and I really didn't have to pay? You know, when he walks into Beis Din and he says we will call Huzam in a different Beis Din, right? Is he saying, and guess what? We told the truth, or he's saying we lied? Because if he's saying that the Eidim were telling the truth, the Eidim were Mazbah telling the truth, really we lied. Really we were lying. And I made in a different basin, it could be you talk about a case where you could answer, you could squeeze it in here, but they come into basin and they say, listen, we testified in a different basin, and we lied, we were Huzam, we lied, we made that guy pay money. So now even if you don't have to pay money because of kasha zomam, like Rabbi Kiva, but still Rav could say, guess what, you got to pay money because you made the other guy pay. Mominous, a regular mominous. Like Garmi, you made the guy pay money, now you pay. Just because you don't have to pay money because of the knas, right? Rabbi Kiva says you don't have to pay money knas. But maybe if they agreed that they were lying, if he's mighty he lied, then the other guy has to pay knas. Then they got to pay anyway if they were getting the other guy to pay. So maybe that's what Rav's saying. If he made the other guy pay, then he's got to pay himself. The Rivosh says something along the lines of this. He says that what happens if Eidim Zayim come into Beis Din and Eidim come into Beis Din and different Eidim come and say Imona Yisem, right? The only problem is they're not there. The Eidim that Reuven and Shimon testify about the I stole money. Reuven and Shimon say Chaim stole money, and different Eidim come and say Imona Yisem. It can't be true. Chaim never stole $100. You weren't there. You don't know. Maybe he stole, maybe he didn't steal, but you were with us. The only problem is these Eidim weren't there. B'shas Maisa. They weren't there when the other Eidim testify. Now there's a klal. Eidim always have to be there when you testify against them. Mm-hmm. Or the Nidin always has to be there. You can't come into Beis Din and testify. It's a klal. We learned to Choshen Mishpah. If you testify against someone, he has to be there in Beis Din. It's got to be before. If he's not there, Eidim is Bartol. Says the Rivosh, what Eidim Zayim. If those Eidim aren't there,
which Eidim?
If the first set of Eidim aren't there, right? They died, they went away. So we're still going to believe the second set of Eidim in Mano Yisim. Elamai, you're not going to make them pay. We're going to believe them, right? We're not going to make the nitva pay the money. We're going to believe the Eidim who are mazim, the first set of Eidim. That's clear? It's good? We got it? So we're going to believe them, we're just not going to make them pay. So what's going to be the din? Ask the Noidi Yehuda, I have a clear case, Lefi Rav. Rav says 1/8 pays. I'll tell you what the case is. Eidim come and say, Imana Yisim on these two. One of them's there, one of them's not there. So the guy that's not there doesn't have to pay. The guy that is there has to pay.
Because it's not Eidim Gimmel.
They're both huzam. You got to be Muslim both. We said you have to be Muslim both. The only Muslim one, that doesn't work. Right? So say Pashad. One of them's there, one of them's not there. The guy that is there pays. The guy that isn't there doesn't pay. So based on this, the Lady Yehuda says, I don't like the Rivash. I don't like this thing that you can be Muslim if they're not there. Either they both have to be there or not. Okay, wow, we're running very late. Says the Mishnah. So, if two people come and say, Reuven divorced his wife, and he didn't give her a get. So what does that mean, he divorced his wife? He didn't give her the ksuva, sorry. He divorced his wife, he didn't give her ksuva. So Rashi learns, we saw him divorce her a month ago, and we've been with him for the last 30 days, every second, and he didn't give her the ksuva. Others want to say, he doesn't have to be with her. They say, we saw him divorce her, that's the chiddush. They say, we saw he gave her a get. And she has a ksuva in her hand, she's got the shtar. And if she has a shtar, it's like she didn't pay. We know for sure he didn't pay. You don't have to say we were with her the whole time. Once she has a shtar ksuva, that's like we know for sure he didn't pay, right? So we know he didn't pay. The Mishnah says either way he's going to eventually have to give her a ksuva. So how much should the Eidim Zayim have to pay? They tried to make this guy pay 200 zuz, but eventually he's going to have to pay the 200 zuz. So how do you know how much this guy has to pay? So we do an assessment. How much would the guy pay for the ksuva? What's the value of the ksuva? How much would the guy pay for this ksuva? That if he dies, or if he divorces her, he's going to give her the ksuva. So the Gemara is going to explain. What does this mean? Kaitzat Shalman, says the Gemarah. How do you make an evaluation? Amar of Chista Babal. You look at the husband. We're just going to read the words and try and explain afterwards. Reb Nosson bar Aishia Amar be'isha. You look at the woman. Amar of Papa be'isha ubechsuvasa. This is all pretty cryptic. What does it mean? So I'll tell you the easiest shot to understand is the Rif. The Rif says like this. What does it mean, Rebal? How much is this ksuva worth? Right? So in other words, he has a ksuva. He says, if he dies, he gets divorced, he's given her 200 zuz. So how do you evaluate, now, if he wants to sell that ksuva to someone, so how much was that ksuva worth? So you look at, in other words, someone could come and say, I'll pay you for that ksuva. Sell me, let's say he puts aside the soda to pay for the ksuva, he could sell that to somebody else, that they have his chus in the ksuva, meaning, if he, what's going to be the din? If he gives her a get, if she dies first, or if he doesn't divorce her, she dies first, then this guy will get to keep the 200 zuz, right? How much would you pay? You get that chance to keep that 200 zuz. You're not going to pay 200 zuz for it, but let's say there's a 50-50 chance he dies first, she dies first. So a guy will pay, let's say, 100 zuz, or slightly more, he's got to make a profit over here. If she dies first, he'll get to keep we normally talk about Sada, he puts the Sada aside worth 200 zuz. If she dies first, he gets to keep the Sada, right? So how do you evaluate it? So the Rif explains, B'Ba'ala, you look at the husband, how old is he? You speak to the Mukhada, you find out what illnesses the guy has, how old is he, how much money he has, how easy it is for him to pay the ksuva, how good the field is. You look at the Baal, how many other wives does he have? Does it look like he's going to divorce her? What's the Shalom Bayis like? If he looks like he's an old guy, he might croak, so then a guy will pay A guy won't pay a lot of money for this
Is this guy
ksuva.
a volunteer and he's trained?
Huh?
Is this guy a volunteer?
Exactly. How? What type of job? How dangerous is his job? Right. So that's what Rav Chisda says. Reb Nosson says no. You look at the issue. How old is the woman? What does she look like? What's her financial situation like? Does it look like he's going to divorce her? The Ran says this makes no sense. How does that make any sense? Surely you look at both of them together. If he's old and she's young, so you put it together. If they're both old, then he doesn't like the Rif Pshat. The more complicated Pshat is that you look at the field, right? This is how Rashi is basically saying like this. He has a field. He comes into marriage, he's got a soda that's worth whatever, 200 zuz. Now, it's in his rishos. If he dies, if he divorces her, she has to go to Beis Din, fight the Yisraelim, try and get hold of this soda. It takes time, it takes money, you got to pay for lawyers, maybe time rabbanis. It takes time. There's a risk. The soda might get damaged in the meantime, and in the whole time he's eating the pears of the soda. So the soda is worth much less to her than it's him, because if for him he's already holding on to the soda. So his value, how much are the Eidim trying to be mazakim? What he could sell the ksuva for, or what she could sell the ksuva for? Because for her it's worth much less. Okay, it's already 9 o'clock. I don't want to go over time. Shkachel Bait, so maybe we'll finish up.
You don't have the minion yet.
We'll wrap this up tomorrow.
You don't have the minion yet.
Yeah, I know, but I don't want to.